My name is Sachin Seth. I'm the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs in the Faculty of Dentistry. Today is Giving Tuesday. I am here to help Dalhousie promote food security on campus. Almost 40% of students report struggling to be food secure. Food and groceries have gotten more and more expensive this year, meaning students still need help to access, prepare, and store regular, wholesome meals. The Food Security Project funds student-led initiatives like the DSU Food Bank and the Agricultural Campus Food Pantry, programs that make free food available on campus. Today, we're going to be making a treat that's easy, affordable, and delicious. All right, today we are going to make some cranberry white chocolate Blondie bars. These are really similar to something you might have seen at a famous coffee shop out there, but our version is going to be just one notch higher. First things first, always when I'm baking, I make sure I have everything measured out. You don't want to be caught midway through not knowing what the next ingredient is going to be or how much you need. This way you ensure that everything turns out perfectly. So what I'm going to start with is my brown sugar. And to the brown sugar, I'm going to add my melted butter. This is really easy. You don't need a mixer for this. All you need is your hands, a whisk, a spatula. So I'm going to add that melted butter right to that brown sugar. All right. And I'm going to whisk this together until I have a nice, smooth, homogeneous mixture. It just takes a couple of seconds here. Want to make sure that you work in the butter and the sugar together. You don't have any lumps of brown sugar in there. Brown sugar has a habit of getting a little lumpy. It loves picking up moisture from the air. Fun trick, if you have brown sugar that's turned a little hard on you, take a piece of bread and put it in the canister that you're having your brown sugar in, and it'll soften up over the next day. You can also buy those fancy brown sugar keepers that you soak in water for a bit. I highly recommend something because the brown sugar will not last. All right, to that, I'm going to add some eggs. I have 2 eggs here that I've cracked. I'm just going to mix that right into this brown sugar butter mixture. Like I said, this is really easy. Once you have everything measured out, it's just about dumping and mixing. So you want to mix in the eggs really well so you don't have any streaks of yolk or white in there. You really can't overmix the eggs into this mixture at this point. It's just going to get a little fluffier if you incorporate some more air. All right, so to this, I'm going to add in my flavoring. So I have vanilla and I have a little bit of orange juice. And I'll mix that in. Don't panic if things look funny at this point. The orange juice has a habit of causing the butter to sort of seize up a bit. It's nothing to worry about. It'll all be okay at the end. All right, now the fun part. This is the one piece of fancy equipment that I highly recommend you get if you don't have it. It's called a microplane grater. It's really useful for grating things like orange to get just the rind off. You can use it for cheese, you can use it for anything. If you don't have this, don't worry. A simple box grater will do the trick. The important thing when you are zesting oranges like this is to make sure that you don't zest too deep and get some of that white stuff that's in there. That's the pith, and it's quite bitter. So I'm going to start zesting here with my microplane grater. And the trick here is to make sure that you run this against the grate and then rotate. You don't want to keep on going in the same spot. And every now and then, do 1 or 2 swipes and then check. And when you get a little more proficient at it, you're going to move quickly. But really what we want is we want the whole orange zest into here. Again, making sure you're not going much deeper. You don't want to get to the white spot. That's where you're going to get some bitterness and not really the orangey flavor that we want here. Now, if you don't have an orange, you could use maybe a tangerine. They're pretty popular this time of year. And of course, if you don't have access to that, you can leave this step out. This is really what's going to separate this bar from maybe the ones you get from the stores. We're going to put that something special in here that will make people go, huh, what's that I'm tasting? We want it to be something that's unique. All right, so we get our orange in there. You can clean off the back where all that zest will sort of collect and just get that in the bowl. All right, get that out of the way. And again, one final mix in to get all that zest worked into this mixture. And then we're almost there. We're gonna put this aside just for a second. Now we'll move on to our flour. I have my flour, all-purpose flour, measured out into the bowl. And to this, I'm gonna add some salt, baking powder, and another secret ingredient, ground ginger. Now, the ginger is not gonna really impart a lot of gingery flavor to it. It gives it just a hint of heat that's just really nice and something that people go, what's that? I can't quite tell what that is, but there's something in there. Let's give that a quick stir, just to incorporate that ginger, baking powder, and salt all throughout the flour mixture. And the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add our egg sugar mixture into this flour. All right, get that all in there. So, at this point, you want to be careful you don't overmix. So I'm going to be using a technique called folding, where I'm just taking my spatula, running it around the side of the bowl, and then flipping it up on itself. I'm going to keep on doing this until I've worked that flour mixture into the liquid. And then when you start getting closer to the end, you can start to just be a little bit more stir-like in action. Okay, but we don't want to overdo it here. We want to make sure we keep everything in the bowl. And when I've gotten to the point where most of the flour has been incorporated, you still might see a few lumps here and there. I'm going to stop and add in cranberries and white chocolate chips. So to that, I'm going to add dried cranberries and my chocolate chips. And we'll continue with our mixing action, and that'll ensure that any streaks of flour that are in there get worked in while not over mixing the batter here. Now, we'll say, if you don't like cranberries and you don't like chocolate chips that are white, you can change this up. This recipe is so flexible. You could add pistachios to this if you have that with the cranberries, makes for a really nice festive treat. You could change this to just kicking out the cranberries and just put white chocolate or dark chocolate chips in there. Really anything goes. It's a very flexible recipe. Just stick to the basic measurements of the chocolate chips and the cranberries and anything will work. All right, so once we have that mixed in, you can see now that this is a nice homogeneous mixture. It's smooth, it's shiny. You don't have any of those sort of curly looking areas that we had from the butter. I'm gonna get this into our pan. So the pan that I have is a 9x13 baking pan. Really, you can be flexible with this too. The only important thing is that you ensure that you've really sprayed this well with cooking spray and get your hands on some parchment paper just to line like I have. This is really important because if you don't do this, you have a good chance of having your Blondie base stuck in the pan, and that's never fun. The flexibility I was really talking about was if you don't have a 9x13, you could use an 8x8, which is a very common square-shaped baking pan. Two of those, this recipe will actually divide itself nicely between two of those with a slightly thinner base when you're all done. Or like I said, the 9x13. Metal pans are generally better because you don't want to have the glass ones. Things tend to not bake quite the same way, but the aluminum metal or even the black ones are a bit better for this. Now I'm just going to get this batter into the pan. And it's quite thick, but we're gonna get it all in here. And as you scoop it out, just make sure you don't see any lumps of flour. You don't want that. It's always a fine line between mixing enough and over-mixing. Over-mixing is never a good thing when it comes to things like brownies and cake. You end up really getting a tough, gummy batter, and you don't want that. You want things nice and tender, and the way to get that is to avoid over-mixing. So now I'm going to spread this out in the pan. Like I said, it's pretty thick. So using your spatula, just move this into all the corners and get it as level as you can. A lot of people panic around baking because it's so finicky, but you know, once you've measured everything out and you've mixed it at this point, don't worry. Just get it in there. The fun part's coming, and that's the eating. So now we have this in here. Get it as flat as you can. Here we go, and this is ready to go in the oven. So the oven is set to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. This will take about 18 to 22 minutes. What you're really looking for is the edges starting to get a dark golden brown, and then you're of course going to have a nice even color on the surface. All right, so while the Blondie base is in the oven baking, you will now have to start with the icing that goes on top. So first what I'm gonna do is get some butter, and put it in my mixer bowl. Now, if you don't have a mixer, it's not the end of the world. Just make sure your butter's on the softer side, and using a rubber spatula, give it a really good beat into a bowl so it's nice and smooth and creamy. This will also work with a hand mixer. So either way, you just want to make sure your butter is nice and soft and creamy. So I'm going to put it in my mixer, and I'm going to beat this on medium-high for about a minute or two just to get it nice and smooth. So when you're done with beating your butter, you should notice it being a little paler yellow color, and it's going to be super smooth and creamy. And that's the key here. You do not want to move forward until you have that butter nice and smooth. To that, I'm going to add icing sugar and some vanilla and a bit of orange juice, along with a bit more orange zest. So let me dump in my powdered sugar. Some vanilla and orange juice. And then about a teaspoon of zested orange. Again, just the same way that we did it before, making sure we don't get any of that white stuff there, sticking just to the zest where all that good orange flavor lives. All right. This goes back on the mixer, and we're gonna mix just for 30 seconds to a minute until everything is nicely incorporated and smooth. Be very careful when you start this mixer again if you're using a stand mixer. If you turn it on high speed, you'll have powdered sugar everywhere, and it is not good. So after about 30 seconds on low speed, when all the powdered sugar is incorporated, I'm gonna turn it up to medium-high for another 2 minutes. So after about 2 minutes of mixing, what you should now have is a really nice pale orangey yellow icing that's gonna go on top of our Blondie base. You'll see flecks of that orange zest throughout there, and it should be smooth and creamy. If for whatever reason you find things are a bit hard to work with and they just aren't really, it's too thick, add another teaspoon of orange juice, and that'll help just liquefy it down a bit so you can work with it. Now that our Blondie base is ready, it's out of the oven. It's been cooling for at least an hour. You want to make sure that it is completely cool to the touch. You never want to put the icing on top of that, otherwise it will melt if it's warm. So I have here a smaller pan that I made. It's an 8x8 size pan, and I'm just using the half of the amount of icing I made. So I would have made 2 of these pans, and the icing would do half and half. So what I'm going to do with my prepared icing that I have is I'm going to take this icing, and again, you can see it's nice and smooth and creamy. If it's been sitting for a while because you have had your brownie base cooling and it sort of got tight a bit, put it in the microwave for maybe 10 seconds at most, and that'll soften it and you can spread it easily. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get this all on our brownie base, and then using a spatula, a knife, I have one of these fancy offset spatulas. You don't have to have one of these. You just want to get something to move this icing around so you can cover the brownie base. Now I've left my brownie base in the baking tray that I had it. You do not need to remove it from here. It's actually easier to ice and work with if it stays in the tray. If you had done a good job spraying and using the parchment, this will not stick. Before I ice, I always loosen up the sides and make sure I can lift it out just for security purposes. The last thing you want is your squares fully iced and then you realize that you can't actually get them out. It's not a fun moment. I like to put a little flourish on my icing, and I move my spatula back and forth over the top just to put a little line. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is meant to be fun and tasty, so don't stress about this. All right, so then on top of that, we're basically done. So, almost. Next, what we're gonna do is take some cranberries, and I'm gonna sprinkle these on top evenly as best as you can. Just get them all around here. So I'm just taking the cranberries and just spreading them out evenly amongst the top here. You don't want to push them too far into the surface, but if you have any ones that are sticking up and not embedding into the icing, just give them a little tuck in there. All right, so the last step here before we're ready to eat is we have some chocolate chips that I'm going to melt, and then I'm going to drizzle over the surface here, and that's the finishing touch. So in the microwave, I'm going to melt this in 30-second intervals up until I have it almost melted, but still have chunks of chocolate chips in there. You have to be very careful when you're melting chocolate in the microwave. It can burn very, very easily. So no more than 30-second intervals, and as you get further along in the process, 10 seconds sometimes works. So be very careful and watch your chocolate. When you're melting the chocolate, what you're gonna notice is after the first 30 seconds, nothing happened. That's okay, that's normal. So you wanna make sure that you give those chocolate chips a stir even though nothing is melted, and then you wanna put it back in the microwave for another 30 seconds, at which point you're gonna notice 20% has melted. Again, give it a stir and then put it back in for another 30. Now at that 30, for me, 80% had melted, maybe 70%, but you wanna give it a really good stir at that point and then put it back in the microwave again for 10 to 15 seconds only. And when you take it out, you'll still see chunks of chocolate chips floating in otherwise melted chocolate chip, but give it a really good stir and I promise you, you won't burn your chocolate and it'll be nice and smooth and ready to be piped on top. The next step is you could in fact take this and drizzle the chocolate right over and you'll get sort of globs everywhere. It'll look really nice and homey. If you want to be one notch up, you could get yourself a piping bag. These you can buy from the supermarket, really easy to come by, plastic. You fill the chocolate into here and then you can really, with good control, drizzle over. Now if you don't have one of these, you can also use a freezer bag. Don't use a sandwich bag, they're a bit thin and the warm chocolate tends to burst through, but these are a bit thicker. And so what you wanna do is use the point of it and fill that with chocolate and drizzle over. So I won't use this, I'll use this. I use a glass to help me sort of keep everything positioned and straight. So what I'm gonna do is take the point and put that in the bag and stretch it over the glass so the point is sitting in the glass. Then I'm gonna take my chocolate, make sure it's all nice and melted, there's no chunks because that will clog things up, and get that into this makeshift piping bag. All right, we have that in there. And as you can see, I'm gonna gather this all up. The chocolate is sitting at the point there. With a pair of scissors, you wanna cut just the tiniest tip off this bag. Be very careful, you don't want too big a hole. So I'm just gonna squeeze it so I can really see that tip. And then I'm gonna cut a tip right off. All right, so now with that small little hole, and tuck this bag out of the way, we're gonna be drizzling our chocolate onto the top. Now if you find as you drizzle, it's a bit fine, which I'm seeing here, that's okay. Better to go back in and re-snip the bag just a bit bigger to get a bigger amount of chocolate out. And so this is the thickness that I like here. So I'm going zigzagging back and forth. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. Then I'll go the other way and I'll just keep on going back and forth to drizzle this chocolate until it's all done. There you go. That is it. This has to go back in the fridge. I would let this chill for at least 4 hours, just so the icing fully sets and the chocolate gets hard. And then you can cut this into triangles by creating 3 rows in this type of pan. I create 3 rows one way, 3 the other, so I have those squares and then cut the squares in on an angle. To get really nice clean cuts, it's a good idea to have a bowl with boiled water in it and put your knife in there. Take it out when it's heated, dry it off, and cut, and you'll slice right through the chocolate and icing super clean. And that's just, and a ruler always helps if you want to be really picky about it. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. They're still going to taste great. Let me show you the finished product. When you have things cut and chilled, this is what you're going to have. I hope you enjoy. It's been really great getting to make these with you, and please try it for yourself. Post-secondary institutions all over Nova Scotia have joined together to tackle the issue of student food security again this Giving Tuesday. Our efforts will have a meaningful impact on campuses across the province. The J&W Murphy Foundation has pledged to match gifts from individuals, so your gift can have double the impact. To give to the Food Security Project, visit projectdal.ca/food security.